we're going to begin with our segment, our extinction segment. And by the way, yesterday I had a little discussion with the people at Infidels, small group of people, but they are, they're rationalists. They try to be as rational as possible. And we talked about extinction, and I mean, it's just a complex subject, very complex. You got to go through many aspects of it, and we covered quite a few of them. So if you're interested, there it is on my other channel, the bgaede channel. Okay, but here we're going to start with extinction, as we usually do. And as you all know, there's this balloon war going on. Forget about nukes. That's kid stuff. Now we have all these balloons, these threatening balloons, and I don't know. Maybe that starts the balloon war. They start throwing balloons at each other. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work out. But all I can tell you, I think I figured it out. Why the Chinese are sending balloons over to the West. Okay. And I think it's got to do with this, you have the U.S. blacklisting some Chinese companies that made parts for that balloon that flew over, the first one that flew over. And I think the Chinese are sending the balloons so that they can sell the West, the things to pinch them with, to pop them with, the pins. So if you're in the habit of buying pins, all you're doing is, you're supporting the war effort, the balloon war. Okay, so I think that's what Chinese are up to. They're trying to sell pins to the West, and so they sell these balloons so that they use them to pinch them. Great. Okay, but well, who knows? Maybe we'll figure out what those balloons are for. I got my worries about it because on the one hand, you say, well, why would they send balloons? I mean, we've got satellites that can make images of matchboxes on the floor, on the ground. And so I have no idea yet why they would send balloons, but I'm sure that in the next few days or few weeks, they're probably going to figure it out and have some theories, and we'll find out. We'll find out what that's all about, the balloon war. Okay. Anyways, but there's another type of war, maybe a little more conventional war that might even lead to nuclear war. That's going on, not in Ukraine, but in the East. With China. And here you have a couple of headlines that puts it in the right perspective. One says that predicts the U.S. dollar dominance will give way to a multipolar currency system as China's yuan gains influence. And they're starting to do some transactions in yuans. And I guess some people like that in other parts of the world, right? Other than the United States. They like it because they believe that United States, if it has inflation, it can control its money supply, and that affects everybody else's who's pegged to the dollar. That's one issue. The other one is that the United States uses that as a pressure point for someone who doesn't behave the way the U.S. government wants. And some of these countries, they want to wean themselves out of that. They want to be able to have a little more discretion in their monetary systems. And so I think that to some degree that's probably going to be true. I think the yuan is going to be eating a little bit into the dollar market, and maybe even the euro might eat into it as well. So we'll find out how that develops. But I think we might be headed towards a bipolar currency, two worlds. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. And there are other currencies out there like the BRICS and so on, so don't put it past them. Politicians are probably working in different parts of the world, are probably working to solve their own problems, and that might mean that they might have to wean themselves from the dollar. The other one is a little more, worrisome. Firewatch, is America going to war with China? And there is this possibility that there's going to be a war in the East. Some predict that it's going to be within 2 years. Okay, that and the trigger point was very likely going to be Taiwan, right? Maybe there's going to be another flashpoint. Who knows? Maybe someone attacks a ship on the China seas. Some people claim it's should be international, and China claims it's theirs. It's their personal lake, and so we'll see what happens with that. Same thing happened hundreds of years ago between, the Ottoman Empire, and together with the West, you had, different countries, Spain especially, and the Venetians, and they had these fleets, and they kind of all used the Mediterranean Sea. And the question was, who did that lake belong to? Did it belong to the Ottomans, to the Turks, or does the Mediterranean belong to the West? And so we've had a little bit of history on that issue, and we'll see what happens in China. Anyways, here's another bit of news that also puts in perspective what might happen in the coming months or years. Okay, and when we're saying months, there's only 12 months to a year, so we can say that in 24 months something might happen. That's 2 years. So yeah, you can talk in terms of months if you're talking about a war starting in 2 years. Okay, so nothing wrong with that. And it says, wake up call, top Republicans sound alarm over China's nuclear expansion. There were several articles on that from different sources. China surpasses U.S. in number of ICBM launchers. And the U.S. military says China now has more ICBM launchers than it does, but the U.S. still has nuclear edge. Okay? And so I guess the Chinese are using some of that money that they're getting from their sales of manufacturing products. They're using it for military purposes. And, that's not good for anybody. I mean, it's probably good for the Chinese, but it's not even good for them, for anybody to stock up on ICBMs. I mean, are those ICBMs just there for threat, for MAD, mutual assured destruction, to prevent the other side from throwing them first or doing something along those lines? Or is it actually to use them at some point? You would think that every country has at some point used the weapons that it develops. But, when you talk about nuclear weapons, you're talking about, real weapons now. Okay, we're not talking about a little pop gun there. And so, you got to think about that. If everybody's arming themselves, you've got Russia and the United States, they're going to stop that START treaty. And so instead of starting it or stopping it, it's going to be the stop treaty. And who knows what that'll bring. And then you'll also have the possibility of bringing down satellites. Okay, you have killer satellites. So it's going to be a lot of fun if any of those weapons ever get used. If they're just for deterrent, well, okay, no problem. They just sit at a table, reach an agreement, we're all fine. But if they do a little more than that, then we better start believing in God for the first time, if you're an atheist, right? Okay, and because of that, they've been putting that doomsday clock back and forth. You've got the UN chief, okay, and he says Secretary General Guterres said experts who surveyed the state of the world in 2023 set the doomsday clock at 90 seconds to midnight. Now, that doesn't mean that in 90 seconds, the world comes to an end. It's just, figurative, that they move that clock, that hand on the clock, closer or farther away from 12 noon, right? The closest ever to the global catastrophe. Okay, so we're as close as ever, a minute and a half away, whatever that means, right? I don't know if that represents months or God's 7 days. Maybe they were 1,000,000 years each. Who knows? He pointed to the war in Ukraine, right? Runaway climate catastrophe. I think that's nonsense. Rising nuclear threats. That's not nonsense. The widening gulf between the world's haves and have-nots, and I think there is an issue there, right, that you got to look at, and the epic geopolitical divisions. Okay, so yeah, there are divisions. The world is kind of cut in half now, or maybe in 3/3. You could say Russia, China, and the United States, unless you put China and Russia together, and I'm not sure that's 100%, if it is at all. It's like they shake hands, but they hold a knife behind their backs and are ready to stab each other. That's happened so many times. Remember, Russia and China were both communists at some point in time, and they were big enemies. You say, who did? They've got the same communist ideals and so on. How come they're enemies? Well, because their ideals don't always match their interests. And so it doesn't always go one-to-one. Okay. Anyways, these are some of the things that are moving the clock closer to 12 o'clock, which is doomsday. And of course, they forgot the most important one, and I'm not sure how many seconds we're away from 12 noon on that, and that is the global economic collapse. And you can see that's not even on the list. And I think the global economic collapse will probably, I can't put my hand in the fire for this, okay, but will probably precede any nuclear exchange. I mean, when the global economy collapses, they may not see any reason to hold back on the nukes, and they might start pressing the red buttons. That's one possibility. In other words, they'll hold off, use it only as deterrence, only until the point where the world economy collapses, nobody has anything to lose anymore, and then they say, oh, what the hell? Let's look at the fireworks. Maybe. That's one angle to this. Angle, that's what I'll be talking about today. Okay, here's another issue. America's 31 trillion debt is getting dangerous as yearly interest crosses 500 billion mark. Okay, just the yearly interest is 500 billion. Some countries don't even make a tenth of that. Their whole GDP is not 50 billion. And here you're talking about 10 times as much. And of course that causes inflation, means that they have to produce more money, and you can see why some countries want to stay away from the dollar if they can help it, partly because of that trend that you see there. The dollar is, they're just producing money out of the little machine, and that devalues the dollar. And you say, well, what's the problem? We can continue doing that forever. Not quite. And the reason you can't do that forever is that devalues the salary, the real wages of the proletariat, of the working man, the person who depends on a salary or a wages. It devalues his money, and also on the money that the governments give out to lots of people who depend on government help to stay afloat. So you have this mass of people who are below the, you could say, in the poverty regime, in the poverty level. And the number came out the other day, 38% of Americans are in that level. That's a pretty big percentage. Almost 2/5 of the population is in the, you could say, poverty level, if that's what you want to call it, low income, okay, whatever that means. But more people from the middle classes, from the medium income, will be falling into that range if you keep producing money like they're producing it now with all this debt, okay? And you can't just reset and say, okay, we're going to change the money, we're going to reset all this. You got to pay the debts. If you don't pay the debts, a lot of people will go under, a lot of companies will go under who loan money and who are expecting to have their money back. So you just can't say, well, we'll just wipe it off the books, we'll red ink it. It doesn't work that way. So you can't just change green money with brown money and say, let's continue rolling. No, it's got repercussions. And you just got to think about that a little bit and maybe do a little bit of research on that. But let me tell you, it's not as easy as just wiping it off the books, accounting books. Okay, just in case, here's one fellow at least who predicts there's going to be a major stock market crash in the coming months, maybe coming years. Talks about in the next few decades. I'm not sure it's going to happen in decades. I think it's going to be closer to months and years than to decades. That's my take on that, just a gut feeling. And yeah, I think the global economy is headed to some kind of catastrophe, some crash. And not only the global economy, you can see, it could happen in the stock market. A lot of them are interrelated. Okay, and as I'll talk in a second here, a couple of people think that a lot of that is just collusion between governments. That they're all shaking hands in the background, keeping the sheeple, down at the bottom, in the dark, feeding them misinformation, etc. Of course, there's a lot of that. I'm not saying there's not, but for them to shake hands, I'm not so sure about that. That's where I don't go 100% with that. I don't think Russia, China are friends of the United States. I don't think that all these people are working in the background, reaching agreements in closed doors and say, oh, let's laugh at all those little ants below. They don't know what we're doing up here. I don't think that's happening. I think that the killing is real, in Ukraine and in other places as well where there's confrontation. But more than that, I think that they are really enemies, and I think their actions demonstrate that. The reality, you can see it in the fact that because of the Ukraine war, the United States has essentially taken over Europe, and Europe is now subservient to the United States in many ways, where they have to follow the directions that are coming out of Washington, right? And they have to play along. The alternative is not too good either. They might fall into the hands of Russia or have problems with Russia. And so they sided with the United States because they said, look, we have more or less the same philosophy. And those people over there, they don't. And so that's the state of the union, of the world union, right? Of how the world runs today. So I don't think there's a agreement behind closed doors. And part of the reason I think that is that everybody has interests. Every country has interests, and not all those interests are in the same direction. Okay, they collide, and so there has to be disagreement. Okay, and I'm a guy who believed for many years in the world government. I don't think that's ever going to happen. No way. There's not going to be a world empire where there's only one government. I don't think so. Not anymore. It was my goal a long time ago, when I was 20, when I didn't know, when I knew everything. Now I know nothing. Okay, and last issue here, Mr. Biden says, or made a comment there suggesting or insinuating that maybe after 10 years, the United States will also wean itself off of oil, or start weaning itself off of oil. And he received a lot of slack for that. A lot of, I guess, the experts, and lots of Republicans, of course, they started chipping on that issue, saying he's crazy. Energy is going to be required not only beyond 10 years, beyond the 2030s, but all the way to 2050. In fact, they're saying the consumption is going to increase, if anything. And so you figure it out. I think you cannot imagine that we can live without, oil, energy, whatever you want to call it, the black gold, for a long time to come. I think the world economic collapse is going to find us still using lots of oil. That's my personal take on that. I don't think we're going to wean ourselves out of oil. And I'm not only saying the United States, all countries, they all depend to a great extent on this black gold, coming out of the ground. All them dinosaurs, actually more from the Carboniferous, and there were no dinosaurs then. Anyways, here's one visitor. He says the following. He says, the premise that humans will tear each other apart during a famine or other crisis is just an assumption. Yeah, okay, we have many historical examples, and what happened was complicated. People will calmly starve to death next to their neighbors and loved ones. Yeah, this is true. And a good example of that is when Hitler invaded Russia, and they had a siege on Leningrad, the Leningrad siege. You had a population of over 2 million people, and they were trapped, and food started running out, and there were a lot of military there because of the whole big Russian army was there defending the city. But as far as I know, I don't know the details, but there were no stealing, in great numbers, right? Maybe there was a case here or there, just like in any city. But not everybody went out there and started stealing. Not everybody got out there and started killing. In fact, a lot of people cooperated. They went into the streets. They shoveled whatever they needed to shovel, like make trenches or whatever was needed, or even get rid of the dead bodies. Or if the Germans bombed some of the houses, they would go and help people and so on. So there was a lot of that. But I want to distinguish that, right, where money was still useful from a world in which money collapses completely, disappears from people's minds because nobody accepts money, and so you can't get rid of money. Now you got a different situation because you can't go to the store, to the bakery, and buy bread. That disappears. That easy stuff that we have today, where we have these bills or even the phones or whatever, all this internet money, and it goes to someone and you buy something. That easy stuff that gets vanished completely out of our world. And what we have then is lack of food because no one produces or distributes food. You can't use your money, and now we have a different situation. And the question there is, are you just going to sit down, maybe with your family? Yeah. Will you sit down with all your neighbors? will all your neighbors think the same way as you do? And again, I showed the other day, I'm not going to show that again, the Twilight Zone segment where this guy builds a little basement there. You know, he's got a place where to hide in case the bombs are thrown. And all his neighbors who knew about it, they just try to break into his little castle there underneath the ground. So you have situations and situations. And I'm saying that when money disappears, you better not trust anyone. My 5 cents worth. Okay. Your point is that other humans are not necessarily loyal to you, so you should be loyal to them. Yeah, it's a question that if you went back to the Paleolithic when we were hunter-gatherers, humans didn't trust humans any more than a lion trusts another lion. And because the only animal a lion fears is another lion, male lion, you know. Why? Because he doesn't fear the cheetah or, you know, I don't know, one of those dogs or smaller animal, whichever animal. He fears another lion because he's the king of the jungle, whether that's true or not, you know. So just think about that. Your worst enemy is going to be another human. So you might say, well, you know, I know these people across the street. I know the guy next door. That could be true, but people react very differently when under pressure, when they're in a different situation. So just keep that in mind. 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 years ago, nobody trusted anybody out there in the wild because there was no law. There was no one to protect you. You were your own protection. Okay? If the other guy was tougher than you, you were out of luck. You couldn't call the Marines. Okay? Anyways, but humans can be loyal to others in spite of crisis. Look out for number one is not as liberating as you might imagine. Yeah, it's not a question of liking it. It's, and I'm not saying liberating. I'm saying that it's like a necessity. Okay? It's like you can't avoid it unless you want to be killed, and you know, by your neighbor. And trust is in the eye of the beholder. If you believe that you should trust your neighbor, well, more power to you. Hopefully it helps you, you know. But I'd be watching out when the global economy collapses. I wouldn't trust anybody. In fact, today, very few people know who their next door neighbors are. They don't even know the names of who lives next door sometimes. He might be a rapist or whatever, the guy next door, killer, murderer. Maybe the law is looking for him. You don't know because very few people, I can't say very few people, but lots of people out there don't even know who their neighbors are. Okay, so keep all that in mind. Americans give, not lend, Israel billions of dollars every year, and it's none of our business. I think it's fair to say we paid and continue to pay for the right to criticize. Absolutely not. Okay. First of all, you're not an American. Okay, and I'm sorry to tell you this. Okay, you're not an American. You're a human being. You were brainwashed to believe you're an American. Okay, you were brainwashed to believe that you're a Russian. You're brainwashed to believe you're a Chinese. Okay, you're brainwashed since you're a kid to look at the flag, say the anthem, that kind of thing, and root for the colors. You know, we're humans. That's all we are. That's objectively what we are. Nationalism, you know, whether you're an American is up here. Okay, Mother Nature doesn't know what you got inside your head. All she knows is that you're a human being. That's all you are objectively to her. Okay, so you know, we say, oh, I'm going to defend my side against their side. Okay, and in this case, a fellow says, you know, I don't like my money going to Israel. You know, but the issue is, you know, you're being taxed. You're confusing two issues here. Okay, let's get them straight. You're being taxed. You have to pay taxes because someone put a gun to your head. It's the government, and they have ways of making you believe in the way they do, okay, that you must pay your taxes. Pay taxes, and you will pay taxes all the way to till you die, okay? We know this. This is the way it is. So you pay taxes. Now, whether that money goes to help the children in Afghanistan or to help Israel, you don't have any say in that. You say, sure I do. No, you don't. You don't have any say in that, believe me. You have no say in it unless you are a representative, you know, or a senator. Maybe then you have some say in it. But you, as a constituent, the guy who votes, you have no say in that whatsoever. Okay? And you might think you have power. You say, I'm going to get together with all these other people who think like me and say, my money doesn't go over there. It's going to go there if the Congress decides, which is a separate issue of you being taxed. These are two separate issues. You might say, hey, I voted for the Democrats or I voted for the Republicans because they would not help Israel. It turns out now these people are helping Israel. And I don't want my money going out there. Well, the answer is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to go with a gun to Washington and force them not to give money out to whomever they want, to whoever the Congress decides to give money to? I mean, a lot of people don't like to give money to Ukraine. They say it's a black hole. You're just swallowing money. But the government's doing it. And so all those people who are against it, even if they were majority, if the government decides that it's in their best interest to help Ukraine because of maybe national security issues, these small ants that say, hey, I don't want my dollars going out there, they have no say in the matter. And it's got nothing to do with taxes. Taxes is what you pay because you're forced to pay. Decisions on where that money goes, that's with Congress. And just like anything else, you don't get to vote who goes to Congress. You get to, in other words, you don't elect. You vote for who is selected for you. Okay? Whomever is selected for you, that's whom you have to elect. Okay? You don't get to select. And I hope you understood that. So that's why, I get out of politics. Politics is just a bunch of baloney. But it took me many years to figure a lot of this stuff. Just don't get involved in politics unless you are a politician and you have some power. Then, yeah, it's your career, no problem. And if you can make money on the side, do it as well. But to say that you, as just a measly old voter who casts a vote for a candidate and expects them to do what you want, think again. Okay, fellow says here, propaganda is as news. Yeah, there's a lot of that. In fact, here I can't get RT, the Russian channels. I just get the headlines, and I don't even know how I got that, but I can't read the news. And, I would like to read the news myself. I would like to compare what they say on the other side compared to what they say on this side of this dividing line, Ukraine war, for example. And I don't get to do that because someone does it for me. They say, we're not going to let you listen to this side. Oh, okay. Called freedom of the press, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of propaganda as news. Okay, the war in Ukraine is one example. Israel, United States is a pro-Israel country, pro-Israel, that favors Israel, because in a way, Israel is the fifth column of the United States. It's just another star in the flag. Okay, there's more than just a love affair there. Okay, so Israel would not be as powerful today if it didn't have all the help from the United States. And so I hope you can figure that out after, 1948, that's when Israel became a country. And if you go back to, 1917, 1919, I think it was, and I talked about the other day, you've got the creation of the Israel state, of Jews going into Israel and eventually becoming a country and pushing the Arabs further and further out. All that was pushed by the West, primarily by the United States. So, the West is very pro-Israel, and that's just a fact of life, okay? So you have to accept it, whether you like it or not, okay? That's why don't get involved in politics, because you might say, but look, they're killing Palestinians or whatever. It doesn't affect you. I'm sorry, it doesn't affect you. Go fishing, get a beer, have a good time, go with family, then you'll enjoy yourself. If you think about what's going on in other parts of the world, your mind is over there, you're not paying attention to what's going around you. Think of it that way. Same with the LGBTQ, the alphabet people, that propaganda is going all over the place. It's propaganda as news. So he's right about that. There's a lot of that going on. Indoctrination as education. Yeah. Especially nationalism. Like I said, nationalism, we're all indoctrinated in nationalism since we are kids. Okay. So that's one of the biggest, also we have religion, but I think one of the biggest religions is nationalism. Mind, that's ingrained in everybody. They feed it to you since you're a kid, and you can't get rid of that so easily. You can't be neutral, okay? And it's very hard for people to wean themselves out of nationalism. Mind control is entertainment. Yeah, there's a lot of games. You have all these kids, getting all their information from TikTok and so on. Kids are hooked on that today. So I'm not sure if you can talk about mind control, but there is an element of a herd mentality out there with this issue, and if you can call that mind control, I guess that's mind control, okay? This fellow says an all nuclear war exchange is impossible. I don't know why he says that it's impossible. Nuclear exchange is totally possible. Everybody presses the red buttons and we're done. So possible it is. Probable, that's a separate issue. Whether they actually will press those red buttons, that's a different issue. But possible, it's 100% possible. It's just not 100% probable. In fact, before the collapse of the global economy, it's probably improbable. That's the way I look at it. But again, you never know. The state of mind of some of the heads of state, okay? And governments are working together in keeping their populations under control through fear. Yeah, I don't think their governments are working together. I don't think Russia works together with the United States at the basic, at the root level. There is some level of cooperation here and there, simply because of self-interest. So they reach agreements. They do shake hands in private. You know, they reach some kind of treaty or whatever. They sign treaties. But to say that they're all in cahoots and collusion where they say, hey, you tell your people this, we'll tell our people that. To some degree, that's true, but not completely the way I think this fellow's proposing, that they're all in such collusion that all the rich people are saying, hey, you know, we're all in the same club, whereas all the poor people are in a different club. I think there is animosity. I think there is a state of war between the East and the West. Okay, I don't think that's fake. Okay, so, but that's my personal take on that. You take my 5 cents worth for what you think it is worth it. Okay. One more comment for another visitor. He said, I research those who create conspiracy-based videos trying to debunk nukes. There are many hours of gathered evidence to the stories, and some of them will make you question things as they so obviously fake some things, okay? Just like some of the moon footage, okay? I don't know about that. Maybe there is some, I don't think it's fake moon footage. I think sometimes they put in there things that they did in the lab. They took pictures of that or filmed something there, and they would put that maybe in official capacity, maybe because it looks better than the film that they filmed out there. And so people say, oh, I got you there. You put something that's fake. Yeah, it is fake because it just looks better, and it served no purpose to put the real thing, which has less quality. Maybe something like that happened. I won't put that past them. But to say that humans did not land on the moon, that's a separate issue. That's got to be analyzed to a different degree. And my take on that is that if you cannot show me, okay, that whatever they could do on the moon, they could do in Hollywood and vice versa, then you don't have a case. You have to show me that there's something that they did one place that they couldn't do in the other. Okay, but if everything on the moon could be done in Hollywood, you haven't said anything. You don't have an argument. Okay, because that means that you have no way of distinguishing the real thing from the fake one. If everything that they did on the moon could be done in Hollywood, we have no way of distinguishing between those. Okay, and the funny part is that, you know, people who say that or who argue that, have that argument, then they go in there and they say, oh, but the shadows are wrong. Oh, the stars in the background are not there. Well, you know, they made so many errors in Hollywood. These guys didn't know that the, you know, Roman gladiator had a Rolex watch. You know, you take that scene out. And so why did they take all these scenes out that, you know, that all these people who scrutinize those movies say, ah, there's an error, there's another error. They find so many errors, you say, well, you know, who did these films? So no, all I can tell you is you got to be able to distinguish between Hollywood and the moon. If you can't do that, you don't have a case. Okay, so that's where you got to, it's not the other way around, like saying, oh, but they could have done that in Hollywood. Yeah, if they could have done it in Hollywood, you don't have a case, because that means that they did it all in Hollywood, and they could have done it in real life out there in the moon. And if you can't tell me what the difference is, then you don't have a case. That's an invalid argument. Okay, so let's think about that. Anyway, it says, the so-called nuclear blast that sideswipes the buildings and decimates them, yet everyone fails to notice camera taking the shots, doesn't even shudder once from the ground tremors. Well, you know, we're talking about something that's very far away. Okay, it's not like the guy's there, you know, stuck to the ground zero. You know, the guy's far away. If you look at the blast in Alamogordo there in New Mexico, they were far away. They saw this from very far away. They had an idea of more or less what was going to happen. So they weren't just standing there next to it. They also used some special glasses. It's not like they were staring directly at the flash. So keep all these things in mind. They are far away. And how much of that vibrates the ground? Well, that's something you got to look at. Is this like an earthquake where it's underneath your feet, or an earthquake when you're a few miles away? Will you feel the tremors? Okay, and I've been through 3 earthquakes in California. We had them over there in Sunnyvale, where I work, and the ground shook. Yeah, I know what an earthquake looks like now. 3 of them I went through. A blast of that magnitude has supposedly been reported to set off small earthquakes. Yeah, small earthquake. Yeah, it depends on how far away you are. So, I'm not sure you said much there, unless you can tell me exactly how far away you were or how far away you should be from a nuclear blast. And if you put the camera there with a focusing lens, you can film that without having too many tremors, especially if you're in some kind of platform that, protects against vibrations.